Hey guys, tonight we slip into a life that is equal parts sweat, smoke, and soot. You're in a cramped wooden hut that absolutely reeks of old metal and burnt hair. There's a dull red glow from the forge casting flickering shadows on the cracked walls. So, before you get really comfortable and fall asleep, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And hey, comment and let me know where you're watching from and what time is it where you are? I find it super interesting to see who's joining you from all over the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on the fan for that gentle hum, and let's go on tonight's journey together. The moment you walk in, a wave of heat punches you in the face. It's like stepping into an oven that's angry you woke it up. Your eyes sting, your lungs protest, and you're hit with the sudden realization this is your life now. The anvil glares at you like it's got something personal against your shins, and a long pair of iron tongs sit nearby, coated in what might be dried blood, or just someone's lunch from 3 weeks ago. There's no health and safety inspection here, just a large man in a soot-covered tunic who points you toward the bellows and grunts. Welcome to your first day as the apprentice to the town blacksmith. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I pour a lot of midnight oil into these sleepy journeys, and your support means the world. Also, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing bedtime history spread across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've been assigned to a forge in a small medieval village. Not one of those cozy, pastoral ones with painted shutters and a bakery next door. No, this one has more mud than road, pigs roaming freely, and a suspicious number of villagers missing teeth. The forge is the loudest, smelliest, and somehow hottest building around. You're not even close to the fire yet, and you're already sweating through your only tunic. The forge itself is a squat, soot-blackened structure built of thick stone and timber. There's no chimney, not really. Just a hole in the roof that smoke occasionally chooses to escape through. Most of the time it clings to your hair, your clothes, and your dreams. You're introduced to the tools of your new trade. An anvil that could probably kill a bear if dropped from waist height. A hammer that looks like it was forged by angry gods and bellows the size of a coffin. Your master blacksmith is named Osric. He's built like a barn and smells like boiled leather. He doesn't speak much, just grunts, nods, or occasionally throws small metal objects at you when you mess up. You get the impression he's fond of you, but honestly, he might just be aiming poorly. Your first task is to operate the bellows. They're made from stretched goat hide and creak like old bones. Your job is simple. Keep the fire hot. Except nothing is simple. The bellows are heavy and awkward, and if you stop even for a moment, Osric roars like a Viking mid-tax on it. You work those bellows like your life depends on it. Spoiler, it kind of does. If the fire dies, the iron cools, and everything becomes 10 times harder to shape. Osric doesn't like that. As you struggle to find a rhythm, your arms begin to ache. Your back protests. You develop blisters in places you didn't think skin could blister. And it's only been an hour. Somewhere between your second and third blister, a villager drags in a broken horseshoe. The horse waits outside, stomping impatiently. Osric sets the iron into the coals and waits for it to glow like lava. Then he hammers it flat with terrifying precision. Bang, bang, bang. Sending sparks into the air and narrowly missing your eye. Hold this, he growls, handing you a pair of tongs gripping molten metal. You grip them. Poorly. The shoe slips, lands near your foot. You yelp and jump back, dropping the tongs entirely. The horse outside snorts as if to say, amateur. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval blacksmiths were indispensable community members, responsible for everything from horseshoes and plows to nails and weapon repairs. They were often exempt from certain taxes because of their essential role in rural life. Quirky tidbit. In some regions, blacksmiths were believed to possess mystical powers due to their control of fire and metal. Some villages even feared them, whispering rumors that smiths could see spirits in the coals or trap demons in iron. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths in smaller villages had more social status than priests, given how absolutely everyone needed something forged, fixed, or sharpened. The hours drag. You develop a kind of rhythm with the bellows, though it's closer to frantic wheezing than grace. Osric occasionally lets you hammer cooled iron, which is satisfying, until he points out you've just turned a perfectly good nail into something closer to abstract art. By midday, you smell like pork rinds left in a fireplace. Lunch is a slab of rye bread and onion stew. You eat sitting on a crate that may or may not be hiding a rat family. You don't care. Your arms shake from fatigue and your eyes sting from the smoke. A passing villager comments that you're the new one who looks half dead already. You take it as a compliment. You try to wash your hands in the water trough outside the forge. It turns black immediately. Your fingernails are lined with soot, and your skin feels like it's been marinated in metal shavings. The afternoon is no better. A local knight arrives, needing a new sword grip. He slams the blade on the table like he's proving dominance. You flinch. Osric doesn't. He eyes the weapon and tells you to fetch the leather strips. You trip over a bucket on the way. The knight chuckles. You hate him. The sword grip is wrapped, sealed with rivets, and tested, all while you pray the knight doesn't notice your hand still bleeding from a wayward splinter. He doesn't. He flips Osric a silver coin and nods at you with something approaching respect. Or indigestion. Hard to tell. By sunset, your ears are ringing. The clang of metal still echoes even after the hammer stops. You sweep ash from the forge floor while Osric leans on a barrel and chews a piece of something leathery that might be jerky or his own boot. He nods, which you take as approval. Or maybe he's just trying to stay awake. You trudge back to the sleeping shed, which is a generous word for a glorified hay pile covered in burlap. You collapse face first, too tired to even remove your soot-crusted shoes. Outside, the night is quiet. Inside, your muscles twitch involuntarily. A single thought rolls around in your mind as you drift off. Only 2,555 more days of apprenticeship to go. Morning comes whether you want it or not, and it brings the shrill screech of a rooster that seems to be personally attacking your eardrums. You peel yourself off the hay pile, muscles aching, throat dry, and face still coated in a fine film of ash. Your tunic smells like regret and smoked onions. You've slept in your boots again. There's straw in your mouth. You spit it out, sit up, and try not to groan too loudly. You shuffle back to the forge just as the sun peeks over the trees, its golden rays making the blacksmith hut look vaguely picturesque, until you step inside and the heat wallops you in the chest like an angry mule. The forge fire somehow never really dies, just simmers in the night, waiting to greet you like a passive-aggressive campfire that holds grudges. Osric is already inside. You're not sure when he wakes up or if he even sleeps. He grunts, gestures to the bellows, and you're back at it again. Your arms feel like wet rope. But hey, it's either this or working in the tanner's pit, and you've smelled that place. This question mark? This is fine. Ish. Today's task, horseshoes. So many horseshoes. You learn quickly that forging a horseshoe is not just heat metal and hit with hammer. There's shaping, curving, cooling, reheating, flattening, punching holes for nails, and praying the horse doesn't kick your head off. And since no two horse hooves are exactly the same, it's not even like you can use a template. Each shoe is custom, handmade, in a world with no gloves and very little patience. Osric demonstrates one with his usual grace. Heat, flip, hammer, twist, hammer again, dip in water with a dramatic hiss, and hold it up like it's a trophy. Then he hands you a glowing orange piece of iron and walks away. You're not ready. Your first attempt is less elegant crescent and more confused metal pancake. Osric looks at it, squints, and mutters something that sounds like, "Bless your heart." But you're not entirely sure if it's a blessing or a curse. Then comes the worst part, shoeing the horse. You meet your first client, a burly, dapple-gray mare with trust issues and hooves the size of dinner plates. The farrier shows up and expects you to work with him. You don't know this man, you don't know this horse, but suddenly you're holding a hot piece of iron and crouching near the animal's twitchy hind leg like someone who's never seen a hoof but is committed to pretending otherwise. The horse doesn't like the sound of hammering, or the smell of hot iron, or you. She shifts, stamps, and nearly sits on you. You drop the hammer and it narrowly misses your toes. The farrier grumbles something unprintable and pulls the mare's leg higher while you try not to weep. You finally attach the shoe. Kind of. It's lopsided, but it stays on. Technically. Osric gives you a look that says, "We'll fix it later," and you both pretend it's fine. The horse snorts and limps slightly. You hope that's normal? Mainstream historical fact. Horseshoeing was a crucial part of blacksmithing in the medieval world. A single warhorse could require new shoes every few weeks, especially during campaigns or rough travel. Farriers and smiths often work together in close coordination, though close might be generous when one of them is dodging hooves. Quirky tidbit. Some knights believe that shoeing a horse with a specific pattern, like 7 nails instead of 8, could ward off bad luck or even improve speed. Superstition ran rampant, and you might find yourself forging a shoe under a full moon just to please a paranoid noble. Historians still argue whether farriers were truly distinct from blacksmiths during the early Middle Ages, or whether the roles were blended until guilds formally separated them in later centuries. By midday, you've hammered out 4 horseshoes, one of which might actually work. Your ears are ringing from metal-on-metal contact, and your hands are numb. You've sweated through your clothes again. Your reward? A short lunch break and some vague encouragement from Osric, which feels like winning a tournament. You eat more of the suspicious onion stew and chew on tough bread while sitting on an overturned bucket. A chicken wanders past and tries to peck your food. You glare at it with the full weight of your exhaustion, and for a moment, the bird seems to understand. In the afternoon, more customers arrive. A traveling merchant wants his cart's iron rim reset. A local noble wants a decorative horseshoe for his prize stallion, whatever that means. You shape the piece 3 times before it meets his ridiculous standards. He says he wants less curve, more nobility, and you try not to throw tongs at him. Then the schoolmaster stops by. He wants a new latch for the village school door. It broke last week, and since then the children have been escaping at will, terrorizing local goats and climbing onto roofs. You agree to help, not because you care about education, but because anything that doesn't involve horses is now your new favorite task. You make the latch. It works. The schoolmaster thanks you with a firm handshake and a fresh apple. You bite into it and remember what fruit is supposed to taste like. For a second, life is good. Then Osric tells you to clean out the forge's ash pit. You spend the next hour shoveling soot and hot ash into a bucket with a makeshift scoop that may once have been a part of a wheelbarrow. You sweat. You cough. You find a half-melted spoon from someone's forgotten lunch. You also find a beetle colony living near the coals. You apologize and move them outside. As the sun dips behind the treetops, the forge darkens. You light the lanterns, oily little things that flicker and smell like regret. Your hands tremble as you douse the coals with water, sending up one final cloud of steam that hisses like an annoyed cat. You step outside, wipe your forehead, and look at the stars. They're beautiful, cold, unreachable. Unlike you, they don't have ash under their nails or soot in their nose. You go to bed with a dull ache in every joint. Your dreams are mostly fire and horses. You wake once in the night, thinking you smell burning, but it's just your pillow. It absorbed the forge scent. It'll never recover. You roll over. Tomorrow is another day of fire, sweat, and questionable footwear, But for now, you let the pain drain away. You close your eyes, and for a few precious hours, you get to pretend that you don't have to shoe another horse ever again. Morning number 3. You know this because your spine informs you it slept on hay again, and because the same traitorous rooster is still employed by the village. You squint at the rising sun and wonder if it's always been this bright, or if you're slowly becoming part bat. Your arms feel like they were tied to cartwheels and rolled down a hill. Twice. You make your way to the forge, which, as usual, smells like charcoal, damp leather, and something faintly resembling scorched soup. Osric is already hammering away, having apparently emerged from the earth itself like some kind of soot-covered earth god. He doesn't say good morning. He just points at the fire, which needs stoking. Of course it does. You sigh, roll up your sleeves, and grab the bellows again. Today starts off quietly. You're almost lulled into thinking this might be a lighter day, until Osric's sleeve catches. Fire. It's nothing dramatic. Just a slow smolder that travels up his arm like a confused moth. He barely reacts, grunts once, and calmly dunks his elbow in the water trough. You, on the other hand, freeze, grab the tongs, drop the tongs, panic slap his arm, and knock over a stool. He looks at you like you've just insulted his hammer's mother. It happens, he says flatly. Apparently, setting oneself ablaze in a medieval forge is just another Tuesday. From that moment forward, fire paranoia sets in. You start checking everything twice. Coals, embers, the back of your tunic. You learn to identify that terrifying sizzle-pop noise when damp cloth hits stray spark. You also learn that wool smolders slowly but smells like tragedy when it does. Your tasks today include reinforcing a gate hinge, re-riveting a barrel hoop, and making nails. Hundreds of nails. You thought making nails would be easy. Heat the iron, snip, flatten one end, boom. Nail, right? Wrong. Making nails is repetitive, exacting, and surprisingly hard on the wrists. You mess up a dozen in a row. One bends the wrong way and flies into a chicken. It squawks and storms off like you've ruined its afternoon. You quietly hope it doesn't come back. Still, Osric seems in decent spirits. He actually teaches you something today, proper hammer grip. Apparently, you're not supposed to choke the handle like it owes you money. With the right grip, your hammer strikes cleaner, your arm aches slightly less, and the nail, just once, comes out perfectly shaped. Osric grunts. It's possibly approval. Or gas. Either way, you'll take it. Mainstream historical fact: fire was both essential and dangerous in medieval blacksmithing. Forges ran hot enough to warp metal, but also posed constant fire hazards to the mostly wooden and thatch-roofed villages. Many fires started accidentally in forges, which is why some towns began requiring stone walls around smithing areas. Quirky tidbit: some blacksmiths wore charms or hung dried herbs like vervain above the forge to calm the fire spirits and prevent accidents. Fire had a personality in the medieval mind, a temperamental force that had to be respected and sometimes bribed. Historians still argue whether the design of medieval forges varied significantly between regions, or whether most followed a uniform pattern introduced by Roman blacksmiths centuries earlier. The afternoon brings more excitement. A traveling monk needs his iron-bound book chest repaired. He's carried it for weeks, and the hinges are cracking. He treats the chest like it holds the secrets of the universe. You treat it like a puzzle box sent to ruin your day. The hinges are tiny and old. The metal has warped in weird ways. Every time you think you've bent a piece into shape, it shifts again. Osric hands you a small file and says, "Patience." You're starting to think that's his favorite word. The monk watches you work, not silently, of course. He hums. Constantly. Off-key. You try to block it out, but eventually the tune lodges in your brain like a splinter. Later, you catch yourself whistling it while hammering a horseshoe, and you feel true shame. Eventually, the chest is fixed. The monk thanks you with a prayer and a dried fig. You accept both. The fig is chewy. The prayer doesn't prevent you from dropping the hammer on your toe an hour later. As dusk approaches, a small crowd gathers near the forge. A young couple is getting married tomorrow, and they've asked Osric for a ceremonial iron ring. You didn't know that was a thing. Apparently it's symbolic. Unbending, eternal, forged in flame. Very romantic, and slightly concerning when you consider how many of these you might have to make during divorce season. Osric lets you do this one. It's a delicate process. The iron has to be clean, shaped carefully, no sharp edges. You work slowly, methodically, tongue sticking out in concentration. You finish the ring, polish it with coarse cloth, and present it. The bride-to-be squeals. The groom nods like a man who's both impressed and terrified of your soot-covered face. They give you a loaf of bread in thanks. It's still warm. You tuck it into your bag and try not to cry from gratitude. As you clean the tools for the night, you think about fire, about how it can melt iron but also make something beautiful, like a wedding ring, or that perfect nail from earlier, or Osric's oddly elegant horseshoe you'll never be able to replicate. You stare at the forge one last time before bed, and for once you don't hate it. You just respect it, and promise to keep water nearby, always. Back in your sleeping hut, you eat half the bread, then curl up with the rest like it's a newborn puppy. You fall asleep to the soft hiss of phantom sparks in your ears, dreaming of nails, monks, and wedding rings that don't warp in the rain. You wake up to rain. At first, you think it's just the dream again, the one where you're hammering on a roof and the sky leaks in. Protest. But no, it's real. Cold droplets patter against the wooden beams overhead. One lands directly on your face. Welcome to Medieval Mondays. The ceiling leaks. Your blanket smells damp. The bread you tucked under your arm for safekeeping is now slightly soggy. You still eat it. Outside, the village is sluggish and gray. The roads are thick with mud, the kind that sucks your shoes off your feet if you walk too slow. You arrive at the forge with damp socks and low hopes. Osric is already there, shirtless under a rain cloak that might once have been a tapestry. He's oiling the tools and muttering to himself. Mondays, right? Today begins with a horseshoe emergency. A knight squire has arrived in full panic. His master's warhorse has thrown a shoe and they're supposed to depart for the next town by noon. The knight is currently sulking in the tavern, drinking mead and accusing the village of sabotage. You've never reshot a warhorse before. This one is a monster. Hooves like frying pans. Muscles rippling under every twitch. You're pretty sure it could kill you by sneezing. Osric lets you lead the job. You clean the hoof, shape the new shoe with more focus than you've ever mustered, and fit it as precisely as you can. The horse jerks once, then settles. A miracle. The nail goes in straight. You finish the job, take a breath, and oh no. One last nail skews sideways. You panic, try to correct it, and the nail snaps. The horse stomps. You dive back. Osric swoops in, finishes it with 3 smooth strikes, and the horse miraculously doesn't end your career or your life. He doesn't say anything, just hands you a cloth. You wipe your forehead and whisper thank you to whatever spirits didn't let you die today. Mainstream historical fact. Blacksmiths were often the go-to workers for knights on the move. Horseshoes, armor repairs, and blade maintenance all fell under the domain of the smith, especially important for mounted soldiers whose equipment literally determined life or death in battle. Quirky tidbit. Some horses were believed to be sensitive to blacksmiths and would refuse to be shoed by anyone who had a bad aura or more likely a nervous grip. There are records of horses being walked miles to a particular smith they liked. Historians still argue whether noble knights actually knew anything about their horses' shoes, or just left all that peasant business to their squires while they recited poetry and polished their helmets. Once the warhorse is dealt with, the day spirals into more repairs. Rain has a funny way of revealing every cracked hinge, rusted bracket, and soggy gate in the village. Everyone suddenly wants something quickly fixed. You get requests for an umbrella handle. Umbrellas in the loosest sense, more like linen tied to sticks. A broken lantern bracket, the lantern itself is just oil in a can. A crooked weather vane, shaped like a chicken, of course. You fix what you can. You improvise the rest. The weather vane ends up facing west no matter what you do. Osric shrugs. Maybe the wind's just stubborn. By midday, you're soaked to the bone, your hammer is slippery, and your trousers keep sticking to your legs. Osric lights extra lanterns inside the forge to chase the gloom away. The heat becomes unbearable, like being steamed alive in a sausage casing. But it's that or freeze outside, so you stay near the fire, hammering half-blind through the fog on your glasses. Okay, not glasses, just smoke-burnt eyelashes. Then comes your least favorite customer, Edgar the Miller. Edgar always wants something elaborate. Today it's an artistic hinge for the door of his new grain shed. You ask what that means. He says, make it look fancy. You ask, fancy how? He says, surprise me. You almost hammer your own foot on purpose. You give it your best. Add a spiral, a few extra curls. It's not bad. Osric glances at it and nods once. Edgar, of course, says it's not symmetrical enough. You smile politely and imagine throwing him into a grain silo. Later, a child brings in a broken cooking hook. Their mother uses it to hang pots over the fire, and it snapped. You forge a new one, quick and simple, and even toss in a little curl at the end for flair. The child beams. They give you a handful of roasted chestnuts in thanks. You don't care that they're burnt. They're hot. They're yours. Rain still drums on the roof as evening falls. You can't dry your clothes. They're soaked clean through. Osric builds up the forge fire higher than usual. You both sit near it for warmth, saying nothing, just existing in the glow and steam. Good swing today, he says suddenly. It takes you a second to realize he means the warhorse shoe job. It's the closest thing to praise you've gotten in a week. Your brain almost forgets how to respond. You nod. Didn't die, you mumble. Yet, he says with a smirk. That night, you sleep in your damp tunic. You don't even try to change. Your feet are wrinkled, your back is stiff, but your hands feel stronger. And even though you still smell like wet ash, you kind of don't mind. You think about the horse, the curl on the hinge, the child's smile. Mondays still suck, but maybe, just maybe, they suck a little less when you've survived one more without catching fire again. You wake up before the rooster this time. Not out of virtue, but because your left calf spasms hard enough to throw you off the hay pile. You roll over, clutch your leg, and try to stretch it out, only to discover your whole body is rebelling. Knees creak, shoulders groan, and you swear your wrists have aged 40 years overnight. Congratulations! You're officially 5 days into blacksmithing, and your body now identifies as medieval furniture. Today begins the same as always. Stumble to the forge, nod to Osric, stoke the fire, wince at the heat. But something's different. You're still not a blacksmith, not even close. Osric reminds you with a charming phrase. You're barely a hammer monkey, lad. And he's right, you're an apprentice. You've been one for almost a week. That means, in theory, you've got around 6 years, 11 months, and 24 days left of this unpaid, unsupervised, occasionally flammable internship. A long, winding path paved with soot, blisters, and unsolicited life advice from your master. Today, you get a crash course in what it really means to be an apprentice. First, you get to clean the forge floor with a wet rag that was probably white 3 centuries ago. Then, Osric tosses you a stack of broken tools, a split chisel, a bent rasp, and a hammer head that looks like someone chewed on it. Fix 'em, he says. You have no idea how, but you try. You hammer the chisel flat, only to accidentally crack the shaft. You grind the rasp with a whetstone until your wrists throb, then drop it in the ash pile by accident. You start reshaping the hammer, but halfway through the head slips off your tongs and dents the floor. Osric watches from the shadows, arms folded. Promising, he says, entirely deadpan. You've learned something else about being an apprentice. It's a test of patience. Yours, his, the metals, the fires. Everything in this world wants you to go slower, sweat more, and mess up just enough to keep learning without quite dying. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval apprenticeships in trades like blacksmithing often lasted 7 years, beginning around the age of 12 or 13. Apprentices lived with their masters, learned through repetition, and were rarely paid, though they received food, shelter, and basic tools. Quirky tidbit. Some blacksmith apprentices in larger towns wore metal pins or badges with tiny hammers on them to signify their trade and training status. These weren't official, they were usually made in secret, like bootleg fan merch, but they were proudly worn. Historians still argue whether blacksmith apprenticeships were harsher than other trades, like carpentry or leatherworking. Some sources claim blacksmithing had the highest dropout, or burnout, rates of all. Mid-morning, Osric starts quizzing you. He points at tools and expects you to name them, describe what they're used for, and guess what's wrong with them if they're broken. It's a lot like a game if the game were invented by a sleep-deprived troll who judges your every answer. Swage block? For shaping metal? Too vague. How? Square holes? Better. Next, let's say a hardy. Small man with anger issues? Silence. Osric blinks slowly. It's the square shank tool that fits into the anvil, genius. You try to remember that, along with a dozen other things. The difference between a punch and a drift, why some tongs are curved, how long to temper iron before it hardens too much to work. Your brain is full of smoke and jargon, and you're pretty sure a small part of it died when you confused pig iron with pig fat. You take a break for lunch. Bread, dried peas, and something that might have once been cheese but now tastes like an old coin. You eat it anyway. Hunger always wins. After lunch, the real humiliation begins. Sweep duty. Not just the forge, everything. Osric sends you to clean the scrapyard out back, where old horseshoes, iron rods, and failed tools lie buried under decades of ash. You haul them one by one into a sorting pile. Rusted tools here, usable scraps there, unidentifiable metal horrors in a third pile you refuse to name. Your reward for completing this? Osric lets you help prep the forge for tomorrow. That sounds better than it is. Prepping the forge means hauling coal, big sacks of it, each heavier than your dignity. You lug them one at a time, panting like a winded goat, and pour them into the coal bin while clouds of black dust rise into your face and settle in your lungs. You are now part coal. Your fingernails are black. Your teeth probably are too. You're sweating coal, bleeding coal, dreaming of coal. You could sneeze and set something on fire. Evening finally creeps in, dragging a quiet calm with it. Osric seems less gruff as the day fades. He pulls out a leather pouch and hands you a single iron nail. First real one you made. Keep it. It's not much. Slightly bent. Head a little crooked. But it's yours. You turn it over in your palm. It's heavy in a comforting way. Solid. Ugly, but earned. Back in your sleeping shed, you place it under your blanket like a lucky charm. It'll probably poke you in the ribs later, but you don't care. It's proof. Proof you're surviving. Not thriving, not yet, but surviving? Tomorrow you might fix a sword or burn your foot off. Could go either way. Either way, you'll still show up, swing the hammer, and hope Osric doesn't call you Hammer Monkey again. He totally will. You wake up groggy, arms leaden, legs stiff. Your dreams were filled with anvils chasing you through flaming fields. Pretty normal stuff now. Today, Osric greets you not with a grunt, but with a full sentence. A rare and terrifying event. We're doing tool maintenance. All of them. You blink. All? He just nods. And thus begins your crash course in the tools of the bruised trade, aka every heavy, awkward, finger-crushing object in the forge. You've seen them before, of course. You've even used some of them. Badly. But today, you're not using them. You're scrubbing them, sharpening them, rewrapping handles, oiling metal, reforging broken bits, and trying not to drop anything else on your foot. The forge, it turns out, is full of tools with names that sound made up. There's the fuller, which isn't a person but a rounded chisel used for grooves. The punch, which does what it sounds like. The drift, which is used to expand holes, not make them, confusingly. Then there's the hardy tool, which lives in the square hole on the anvil, and definitely sounds like it should be a character in a bard's song. You also rediscover the tongs, dozens of them, all slightly different. Flat jaws, curved jaws, rounded tips, angled ends. Osric quizzes you on which one grabs what. You get one wrong. He says, "Hope you like your fingers," and moves on. Mainstream historical fact. Blacksmiths used an astonishing variety of specialized tools in the Middle Ages. Many were handmade by the smiths themselves, customized to suit the items they made most frequently. Horseshoes, blades, nails, hinges, locks, and even surgical tools. Quirky tidbit. Some blacksmiths believed their tools absorbed character over time. Tools passed down through generations were said to carry the temperament of past masters. A grumpy pair of tongs? Not unheard of. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths in rural villages had as sophisticated a tool set as those in cities, or whether many tools were simply improvised from other professions, like carpentry or masonry. After you've spent what feels like a decade cleaning the tools, Osric finally lets you try fixing one. The chisel you cracked 2 days ago, remember that beauty? It's back for revenge. You file the edge, heat it, draw out the metal, and reshape it with cautious, practiced hammer taps. Not too hard, not too fast. Osric watches, doesn't say a word. The chisel is reborn, shorter than before, not perfect, but it cuts. Osric takes it, tests it on scrapwood, then shrugs. Works. Which, in Osric speak, is basically a standing ovation. Then comes the bellows. You've used them every day, yes, but you've never cleaned them. And oh boy, do they need cleaning. They're covered in soot, flakes of dried ash, and something sticky you don't investigate too closely. The leather is cracking, the wood is creaking. They wheeze like a dying animal. You spent hours oiling the leather, tightening the seams, replacing a torn hinge strap, and patching a hole the size of a walnut. By the time you're done, your hands are black and smell like boiled goat. You test them. Poomph. They breathe again. Stronger, cleaner. You grin. Osric grins back. Well, he twitches slightly at the mouth. Same thing. Later, you're entrusted with the sacred task of realigning the anvil. This is, to put it lightly, terrifying. The anvil is the forge's heart. It's scarred and heavy and kind of beautiful in a could definitely kill a man way. It wobbles slightly, just enough to annoy Osric. You slide wedges beneath it, brace it with stones, tap it into place with a smaller hammer, and manage not to crush your toes. You even test it. The echo sounds right. Osric approves. You didn't drop it. Progress as a reward, you're allowed to temper a blade. Just a kitchen knife. Rusted, bent, but still a blade. You heat it to glowing orange, then dunk it in oil. The sizzle is violent, exciting, terrifying. You polish it, sharpen it, wrap the grip in leather, and test the edge on a piece of old parchment. It slices clean. You stare at it, breathless. You made that. It hits you for a second just how much of your life has become about these objects. These tools, these heavy, stubborn, blister-raising pieces of iron and wood. They bruise you, yes, but they're starting to shape you too. Literally. Your shoulders are getting broader. Your hands have calluses. You've got tiny burn scars that weirdly don't hurt anymore. You look like someone who works, even if, technically, you still don't get paid. You eat dinner sitting on the edge of the forge. Onion soup again, but someone added carrots. You count it as a victory. Osric doesn't talk much, but he leaves half a loaf of bread for you without a word. You pretend not to notice. That night in your shed, you look at the tools of your own life. The bent nail, the patched tunic, your only pair of socks hanging damp over a beam. You're tired. Bone-deep tired. But something in your chest feels warm. Not forge warm, not coal warm. Earned warm. You made a chisel work again. You made a knife cut. You didn't die. You're learning. Tomorrow there will be more. More tools. More smoke. More accidental burns and confusing vocabulary. But maybe also a moment, just one, where something you hit with a hammer turns out right. And that's enough. You wake up with a start, not because of pain, though it's there, or the rooster, mercifully late, but because someone is yelling your name. Sort of. It's more like a garbled attempt at your name through a mouthful of barley. You stumble out of your hay bed and find a boy waving his arms in the early morning fog. Osric needs you, now. Uh-oh. You sprint toward the forge, still tugging on your bootlaces. Osric is outside, shirtless and soaked in sweat, surrounded by a growing cluster of villagers, each holding something broken, twisted, or unrecognizable. The blacksmith's become the village's emergency room. A nun from the priory has arrived with a bent candelabrum. A knight's page is holding the lord's sword, snapped clean in two, probably from showing off. An elderly farmer needs a new plowshare. Someone else has a rusted cooking spit. And someone, inexplicably, brought a brass weather vane shaped like a mermaid. You're not entirely sure what's happening. A festival? An accident? A prank? No one explains. Osric just points. You get to work. Today, you're the fixer of everything. Horseshoes, hinges, handles, headpieces. If it can be bent, broken, scorched, or snapped, it ends up on your table, and the villagers don't just bring items, they bring expectations and opinions. This used to spin better. Can you make the sword a little shinier? Mother Superior says it's crooked, but I say it's the light. You nod politely, grind your teeth, and quietly dream of disappearing into the woods. Osric, meanwhile, moves like a golem possessed. He doesn't talk, just gestures. You follow suit. The forge becomes a blur of motion, hammering, tempering, riveting, filing. The air turns thick with smoke and noise. You've never seen so many people gathered around the forge, nor so many strange requests. Someone wants a metal cross repaired. Someone else wants a small padlock for their diary. You don't ask questions anymore. Mainstream historical fact. Blacksmiths in medieval villages weren't just makers of swords and horseshoes. They were the go-to fixers for nearly everything made of metal. Tools, cooking implements, farming equipment, religious artifacts, locks, even musical instruments. Their work reached every layer of daily life, from peasants to priests. Quirky tidbit. In some towns, blacksmiths were called upon to help with dental tools and even the occasional tooth extraction. They had the strength, the pliers, and the grit. What else do you need for amateur dentistry, right? Historians still argue whether blacksmiths truly understood all the devices they fixed, or whether they just hit everything with enough confidence to make it look intentional. At one point, you're handed a cracked helmet. Not a war helmet. A ceremonial one worn by the local reeve during tax collection. Apparently, it must look dignified, or the villagers won't take him seriously. You hammer it back into shape, polish it until your hands cramp, and etch a little star on the brow just to be cheeky. No one notices. Or if they do, they pretend not to. Next comes the plowshare. It's huge, rusted, more cracked than the metal. A farmer with a beard like a curtain waits patiently, chewing something unidentifiable. Osric lets you handle it. You study the plowshare, heat it, bang it, flatten the edges, weld the crack with iron filler. It's functional, not pretty, but solid. The farmer slaps you on the back, nearly knocking you into the fire. "That'll run straighter than my brother-in-law," he says, which you think is a compliment. Around mid-afternoon, the crowd finally thins. Osric wipes his forehead, takes a gulp of something vaguely alcoholic from a flask. and leans against the forge wall. You're covered in soot, fingers trembling, stomach empty. He gestures to a small bench behind the forge. Go. You go. You sit. The world swims. Your ears ring. You nibble on a piece of bread that might be older than the plowshare. It tastes like victory. A few minutes later, a man approaches. He's dressed better than the rest. Wears a dark cloak, polished boots, a scribe maybe. He carries a small chest, bound in iron bands. The lock's broken. He needs it fixed. Important records, he says, tapping the box. Osric lets you take it. You study the lock. It's delicate, rusted, ancient. The kind of mechanism that hisses at you if you breathe too hard. You dismantle it, slowly, carefully on your workbench. One wrong move and you'll be starting over with a blank lid and some rope. Piece by piece you realign the pins. You forge a new clasp. Reinstall the tumblers. Add a bit of oil. It clicks, it locks. The man tests it, opens it, closes it, opens it again, then nods with the solemn approval of someone who just watched a cathedral get blessed. He hands you a silver coin, your first. Osric eyes it. You earned it, he says. You almost cry. As the sun sets, casting long gold streaks across the mud, you and Osric sit side by side in comfortable silence. The forge crackles behind you. Someone left a half-eaten apple on the anvil. You don't care. You're too tired to move. Osric speaks finally. You're useful, he says. Sometimes. Coming from him, that's practically a song. You fall asleep that night clutching the silver coin like it's a relic. The soot under your fingernails, the ache in your spine, the ringing in your ears, they all fade behind one thought. You're the fixer now. The bruised, blistered, mostly unsupervised fixer of everything. And somehow, that doesn't feel so bad. The day begins with a whistle, not from a person. No one whistles cheerfully around here unless they're deeply suspicious or concussed, but from Osric's forge itself. A high, sharp yay as the bellows hiccup and the flames flare. You've never heard that sound before. Neither has Osric. He frowns, leans down, listens again. Not good, he mutters. That's when he tells you, we're low on iron. Not low, like we'll have to be frugal. No, low as in, we have 4 ingots left, and 2 of them look suspiciously like painted bricks. There's no delivery coming, no cart squeaking down the road. The last shipment was robbed, delayed, or possibly just redistributed by the Lord's soldiers. You're now forging in a world where good iron is rarer than fresh bread and almost as expensive. Which means recycling. Today's job. Rummage through the junk pile behind the forge for every bit of old metal you can find. Snapped hinges, broken swords, rusted chainmail, nail clippings. Yes, really. And whatever else could be melted down, reforged, and prayed over. And thus begins the great iron shortage panic. Mainstream historical fact. During certain periods, especially in remote or resource-scarce areas, medieval blacksmiths faced frequent shortages of usable iron. It was expensive to mine, heavy to transport, and tightly controlled by local lords. Recycling was not a choice, it was survival. Quirky tidbit. Some forges kept iron jars, clay pots filled with scraps, shavings, and even dust from the floor, to be melted and reforged in emergencies. Some blacksmiths even bartered with old horseshoes or broken kitchen knives when coin was scarce. Historians still argue whether these periods of scarcity helped accelerate blacksmithing ingenuity or caused long-term declines in craftsmanship due to constant recycling of poor quality materials. You dive into the junk pile like a raccoon with ambition. It's a mountain of sharp edges and tetanus opportunities. You find a sword hilt without a blade, a handful of bent nails, 3 rusted horseshoes, a twisted iron spoon, a door knocker shaped like a lion. Its nose is missing. You haul the pieces back inside, toss them into the crucible, and watch as Osric begins the slow, smoky process of refining trash into treasure. Most of the metal is junk, too brittle, too corroded, too cursed-looking, but some can be salvaged. You skim off the slag, pour the molten metal into crude molds, and wait for it to cool. The results? Not pretty, but usable. Kind of. Osric eyes a half ingot and mutters, "That'll do for nails." Which means it's just shy of garbage, but technically hammerable. You learn to love the ugly metal, the kind with pock marks and weird colors, the kind that screams when you hit it. It's stubborn, inconsistent, and smells faintly like sadness, but it's all you've got. You practice making hinges from salvaged wrought iron. They warp. You adjust. They warp again. Eventually, one hinge comes out squarish. You show it to Osric. He blinks. Looks like it might last a week. You beam. Then comes the sword project. A local boy brings in a family heirloom, a blade snapped at the hilt, pitted with rust, wrapped in what might be mummified lizard hide. He asks if it can be restored. Osric shrugs. Depends what you mean by restored. The boy says, "Make it worthy." You raise an eyebrow. Osric sighs. "Let's try." You spend the whole afternoon on that sword. First, you remove the rust. You file the jagged edge smooth. You melt and reshape the metal, lengthening the blade with some of your hard-earned scrap. You temper it, sharpen it, wrap the grip in fresh leather. When you're done, it's not a weapon of legends, but it's sharp, balanced, reborn. The boy takes it in both hands, eyes wide. It's perfect. You don't say anything. Just watch him leave, blade bouncing on his hip like a knight from a bedtime story. You know it'll probably break again in a few years, but for now, it's got magic in it. Your hands gave it that. Then Osric drops a chain on your bench. Real one. Thick links, heavy. It's from the drawbridge, as he says. One link's cracked. You stare at the link. It's wide enough to wear as a bracelet. The crack runs deep. He points to the forge. Fix it. You look at the heat, the tongs, the welds you barely understand. And you get to work. It takes you hours. You heat the link until it glows like the inside of the sun. You fill the crack with molten scrap, hammer it shut, reforge the seam, reheat, temper, hammer again. When it cools, you test it. It holds. Osric picks it up, gives it a few hard jerks. "It'll last," he says, then adds, "Probably." Which again is practically a standing ovation. By evening, you're lightheaded from smoke and hunger. You haven't eaten since morning. You find an old apple someone left by the windowsill and eat it slowly, pretending it's a feast. Your hands are raw. Your tunic is streaked with iron dust and sweat. But you've done it. You've turned junk into function. The forge glows a little dimmer tonight. The coals are tired like you. But there's a satisfaction in the air. A quiet pride. A reminder that even when the world gives you rust and scraps, you can still forge something useful. And maybe even something worthy. You're halfway through your morning onion bread when the door slams open and a man stumbles in, panting like he just sprinted through 5 miles of mud and 3 solid arguments with his wife. Something's broken, he wheezes. Of course it is. Turns out it's not a horseshoe or a sword this time. It's the village's main drawbridge chain. The other one, the first chain you repaired, that held? The one next to it? Not so lucky. The bridge is currently stuck halfway up, with a trade cart and 2 very confused donkeys stranded mid-tilt. One of them is upside down. The other is chewing something that may or may not be another villager's hat. Osric looks at you. You know that look. Grab the tongs. And just like that, your day of rest turns into a marathon of fixing the unfixable. First up, the drawbridge chain. This one's worse than the last. It's been rusted to oblivion, and part of it is bent into a shape that looks like a sleeping dragon. You heat it. You beat it. You curse at it. You reforge half the link with salvaged scrap from the now empty iron jar. It holds, but it complains the entire time. You haul it back with Osric and reattach it while dangling off the edge of the moat, tied to a rope, swaying slightly in the wind, and definitely rethinking your career choices. The bridge lowers. The donkeys descend. One of them snorts at you in passing. You're not sure if it's respect or just gas. Mainstream historical fact. Blacksmiths were routinely responsible for maintaining large structural elements in villages and castles, especially drawbridges, portcullis chains, and gate hinges. These tasks required not only strength, but complex problem solving and sometimes engineering know-how. Quirky tidbit. In some towns, blacksmiths were so vital to bridge maintenance that their forges were built right next to moats or gatehouses. One legend tells of a blacksmith who held a collapsing drawbridge together with tongs and raw determination until soldiers could arrive. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths were trained in basic engineering or simply figured things out by trial, error, and an alarming number of near-death experiences. But your day isn't done, because now someone brings you a lock. Not just any lock, a cursed lock. At least, that's what the superstitious old shepherd claims. He says the chest won't open anymore, even though the key still fits. He claims it contains something precious and dark. You resist the urge to ask what that means. Instead, you inspect the mechanism. It's jammed, gummed up with resin, dust, and what might be dried pig fat. You clean it. Carefully file the pins. Oil the inner workings. When it finally clicks open, the shepherd gasps. Inside the chest? 2 silver buttons and a moldy lemon. You don't ask. The shepherd insists on paying you with a carved whistle and a large potato. You accept. Next up, someone wheels in a broken plow. The iron is warped. The handles are cracked. You'd be better off building a new one, but there's no iron left for that. So you straighten the blade as best you can, rivet the handle brackets back in place, and reinforce the whole frame with 4 mismatched metal strips. When you're done, the thing looks like Frankenstein's plow, but it holds. The farmer claps you on the shoulder. Ain't pretty, but neither's my ox, he says, and you both share a laugh that smells faintly of onions. You wipe your hands, thinking that maybe, just maybe, you'll get a few hours of quiet. Wrong again. A woman from the convent arrives. Her voice is gentle. Her hands are covered in flour, and she presents you with the remains of the convent's bread oven latch. It's melted. How, you ask? We tried to bake fish. You don't ask follow-up questions. Instead, you hammer out a new latch, forge a replacement hinge, and even add a loop so they can hang it on the wall when not in use. She thanks you with a warm roll and a small clay rosary. You add the roll to your growing, weird food gifts pile. Then a child runs in, dragging a wooden toy cart with an iron axle that's snapped. The boy looks up at you with huge eyes, saying only, "You fix?" You do? You don't even charge him. Instead, you give the cart a little push, and he squeals as it rattles down the dirt road, one wheel slightly wobbling like a pirate on a bender. The sun begins to set, but the forge still glows. Osric leans on the wall, arms crossed, eyes half closed. You sit on a stool, hands raw, arms trembling, breath slow. "You did good today," he says after a long silence. You don't respond. You just stare at the coals. Because today you fixed everything. A bridge chain, a cursed lock, a cracked plow, a nunnery's baking problem, a child's only toy. None of it perfect, but all of it functional. And in a world where most things break faster than they heal, that's enough. You lay in bed that night with sore hands and ash in your ears. The potato gift is sitting in the corner. You've named it Jeffrey. Your eyelids flutter. The sound of hammering still rings in your mind, but it's quieter now. More like a heartbeat. Steady, familiar. You fixed the unfixable today. Tomorrow, something else will break. But now you sleep. You wake up and your bed crunches. It takes a moment to register that the crunch is not your spine, though it could be, but the silver coin you tucked under your hay last week. You find it lodged between two boards, a little sticky and covered in fuzz, but still gloriously shiny. You slip it into your tunic pocket and allow yourself a proud little grin. And then Osric walks in with the worst news possible. We're out of barley. You blink. Barley? For payment. Right. Because in this lovely economic system, you're paid in food. Mostly grains. Occasionally soup. Rarely coins. And now the grain has stopped. Osric shrugs. Miller's short? Said the Lord's men took the rest. You process this while chewing a very stale end of bread, and realizing your pay might now consist of half a turnip and a firm handshake. Wages? Barely. Respect? Maybe. Glory? Nope. Still, the work doesn't stop, and neither do the people. A nobleman sends his steward to drop off a battered shield. Fix it. Paint it. Make it glorious again. You flip it over. It has 3 punctures, 2 burns, and a squashed toad stuck to the underside. You don't ask. The steward insists it must gleam. The Lord's hunting party is tomorrow, he says, as if that explains everything. You scrape the old paint, buff the dents, heat and flatten the warped rim. You patch the holes with scrap and hammer the rivets in tight. Then you paint it with what passes for red and gold in this village. Powdered ochre mixed with egg yolk and attitude. The result is fine. From 10 paces, it might look regal. From 5, it looks like what it is. Patched together nobility. You send it off, and the steward tips you 1 dry fig. 1. Mainstream historical fact. Most blacksmiths in medieval Europe were not paid in money. Instead, they often received payment in kind. Grain, eggs, cheese, labor exchanges, or IOUs from landowners. Only those working for major lords or in cities might see coin regularly. Quirky tidbit. Some smiths would hide coins in the walls or under the forge as charms or emergency stashes. A few even melted them into trinkets to disguise them from thieves, and occasionally from taxes. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths were truly underpaid relative to their social importance or simply caught in the economic web of feudal barter systems that valued bread over brilliance. Next up is a wheelwright who wants you to forge a new rim for a cartwheel. You try to explain that the wood is warped and the spokes are cracked, but he just says, "It needs to turn." That's it. You forge the rim, shape it in the fire, and attempt the delicate act of attaching red-hot iron to dry wood without burning down the village. It smokes a lot, but it holds. Osric tests it by rolling the wheel down the lane. It veers left and crashes into a barrel of pickled onions. You call that a qualified success. Meanwhile, your stomach growls. Loudly. Osric tosses you a small hunk of cheese, hard enough to be legally considered a weapon. You chew it slowly, wondering how many hours of work that bite cost. In the afternoon, a woman named Marta comes in. She's holding a broken sewing spindle, its iron shaft snapped. "I can't mend clothes without it," she says. "And the baby's due soon." You forge her a new spindle, small, elegant. You even polish it until it gleams. She thanks you with a warm smile and a fresh cloth bundle of stew. Actual meat in it, even. You eat it slowly, sitting on the forge step. Osric joins you, says nothing. Just eats an onion raw like it's an apple. Later that day, a bard appears. Of course he does. He's got a lute, a cloak that smells like mead and regret, and a request. His iron harp key snapped. He can't tune his instrument, can't perform, can't woo the ladies. You resist the urge to point out he could just sing a cappella. Instead, you forge him a new tuning key. He's overly dramatic about it, clapping his hands and bowing like you just saved his soul. Then he sings a thank you ballad. For 2 minutes. Off key. Osric whispers, "Fix his voice next." As dusk falls, you get a visitor you didn't expect. The Reeve. The village's tax collector. He doesn't bring anything broken, just a scroll. It's a list. A tally of who owes what. And at the bottom, your name. You brace yourself for bad news, but he surprises you. You've paid your dues, he says. The Lord's pleased with the repairs. You squint. Wait, paid? With what? He taps the scroll. Your work. Apparently patching a knight's armor, reforging the Reeve's ceremonial helmet, and fixing the tax chest's lock all count. You've been working off your tax in iron and sweat. You feel oddly triumphant. You still don't have money, or glory, or even much respect, but you're starting to become needed. People talk to you differently now. Less like you're a soot-stained errand boy. More like someone who makes things that matter. As night settles, Osric slaps you lightly, on the back. You're not useless, he says. Then, as if worried he said too much, he shuffles away into the dark. You lie in your bunk, coin in one hand, stale bread in the other, and wonder if you've crossed some kind of invisible line. Maybe being not useless is the closest thing to glory a blacksmith ever gets. And maybe that's enough. The forge is cold. That's the first sign something's wrong. Normally you walk in and get walloped by the heat, like a bear hug from an open oven. But this morning the air is still. No smoke, no hiss. Just silence. Osric is pacing. Bellows are gone. You blink, still half asleep. Gone? Gone, he says again, pointing at the massive wooden contraption at the back of the forge, or rather where it should be. You walk over. The bellows are still technically there, but they're split wide open down the seams. The goat hide is torn, the handles are cracked, and one of the hinges is dangling by a nail. They gave out, Osric grumbles. Finally. You stare at the wreckage. No fire means no forge. No forge means no blacksmithing. No blacksmithing means you might actually have a free day, or you might be out of a job. Osric looks at you with the face of a man who's about to ruin your week. We're building new ones. Of course you are. When the bellows break, everything else follows. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval forge bellows were often made from layered wood and stretched animal hide, typically goat or ox. They were prone to tearing under constant heat and strain, and a blacksmith couldn't work without them. Repairing or replacing bellows was labor-intensive and required knowledge of woodworking, leatherwork, and clever airflow engineering. Quirky tidbit. In some places, blacksmiths believed the bellows housed a forge spirit, an invisible being who helped or hindered work depending on how well the bellows were treated. Tearing them was considered bad luck. Some even whispered apologies when patching holes. Historians still argue whether bellows evolved regionally due to material scarcity, or whether most medieval forges followed Roman designs with only minor changes over the centuries. Osric sets the plan. You'll use spare planks from the carpenters, goat hide from the tanner, and your own cursed patience. He sketches the design in the dirt with a stick. You nod along, understanding exactly none of it. It's like being asked to build a musical instrument that also starts small house fires. Your first task? Find materials. The carpenter has wood, but only warped leftovers from a failed boat. The tanner has hides, but they're stiff, crusty, and smell like something died screaming. You take what you can carry. Back at the forge, you sand the wood flat-ish, trim the leather with Osric's wickedly sharp blade, and begin assembling the frame. It's like crafting a coffin that's meant to breathe. You drill holes with an iron bit, lash strips of hide to the frame, and soak the seams in resin. You cut a long iron pipe, your new nozzle. Then you wedge in the valve, a small flap of leather that allows air to flow one way only. Osric grunts approvingly. This'll work, probably. It takes 2 full days. By the end, your hands are numb, your tunic is glued to your chest with sweat, and you've sworn at wood more than at any point in your life. But the bellows stand, You take a breath. Press down. Poomph. Air rushes into the coals. Dust swirls. The forge stirs. It's not hot yet, but it's alive again. You try again. Poomph. Poomph. Stronger. You smile. Osric walks over, presses the handles once himself, then nods. They breathe. And in this world, that's all that matters. The rest of the day is fire. You need to reheat the forge, bring the coals to working temp, and test the new bellows under pressure. Osric hands you the ruined remains of an old cleaver. Let's see if you can make this scream again. You set to work. The metal resists at first. It's thick, bent, full of old stress fractures. You heat it until it glows, hammer it flat, then draw it back into shape. The bellows respond beautifully, each squeeze bringing a burst of flame, like a dragon learning to breathe. You finish the cleaver by nightfall. Osric picks it up, tests the edge on a piece of leather, and gives the faintest nod. Could chop a pig, or a thief. High praise. And then, because medieval life loves to reward your effort with catastrophe, a storm rolls in. Rain pelts the roof. Thunder cracks. Wind howls through the forge like it wants to be part of the story. You rush to close the shutters. Osric covers the bellows with a wool tarp. You both crouch beside the fire, watching it hiss as droplets sneak in through the chimney. The forge is fragile. Everything here is. Held together by sweat, willpower, and rope knots that might be structurally sound. But as long as the bellows breathe, you can work. You sit in the glow, listening to the storm, heart beating. Slower now. You built something. Something real. Something essential. Tomorrow, the villagers will come again, with broken shears, warped hinges, burnt pans. Always something. Always urgent. But tonight, you sit beside your new creation, the forge's lungs, and you feel something you haven't felt since you arrived. Capability. Not perfection, not mastery, but the deep, quiet sense that if it breaks, you can fix it. And that might just be enough to carry you through whatever storm comes next. You know what's worse than a thunderstorm? A thunderstorm followed by a thief. You're barely awake the next morning when Osric slams the door shut behind him. "Someone was in the yard," he says, voice low, like a wolf trying not to howl. You blink blearily. "Last night?" "Probably. Tracks near the scrap pile. Tools missing." Your heart drops. Not the anvil, thank the forge gods. But the good rasp? Gone? The socket chisel? Gone. And worst of all, the new cleaver you just forged? Gone. You're furious. Not just at the thief, but at the way this place gives you so little. And then dares to take that away too. Osric doesn't rage. He doesn't shout. He just gets quieter, more dangerous. Double locks. No night coals. We work light from now on. Which means, starting today, you forge under tighter rules, shorter hours, and more suspicion. You keep your eye on every stranger who walks past. You tie the bellows shut with rope. You even stash your favorite hammer under the bench like a jealous dragon hoarding treasure. And then, as if the forge spirits decided to double down, Osric gives you your next task. Forge horseshoes by moonlight. The merchant's horse went lame. The road's too muddy to wait. The moon is high and the forge must burn, even if quietly. So you light the coals. You pump the bellows in darkness. You hammer soft. You move slow. And it's strange. Blacksmithing after dark feels like a secret ceremony. The fire glows orange against the shadows. Sparks rise not in bursts, but in little flares, like fireflies made of steel. Your own shadow dances along the wall, stretched and jagged. The air is cooler, but the forge still sweats. The shoe glows and you shape it, curve it, tap it into a crescent. Your hands know what to do now, even in half-light. Even when your eyes can't see the details. Osric doesn't hover, he just watches. Once he says, "Too much toe." You fix it. Mainstream historical fact. In times of urgency, especially war, storms, or travel deadlines, blacksmiths were known to work long into the night. Some villages even expected them to be on call for emergencies, and noble households kept a smith nearby at all times. Quirky tidbit: superstitious villagers sometimes believed that night-forged iron was stronger, or cursed depending who you asked. Some smiths quietly refused to forge after dark, fearing ghosts or bad omens in the firelight. Historians still argue whether these fears were cultural leftovers from pagan times or simply practical caution, given that low light led to more workplace accidents and sleep-deprived apprentices were more likely to hammer their own thumbs. By midnight, you finished 2 shoes. The merchant arrives with a horse, a big, tired beast with a crooked left leg. You shoe the animal quietly. No panic this time, no kicking. Just methodical motion. The fire, the glow, the steam. The merchant watches, eyes wide. You don't even flinch. You shrug. I've already caught fire once. Osric chuckles in the corner. You finish the last shoe, wipe your hands, and extinguish the coals. The forge goes dark, like a candle snuffed. You feel a little dizzy, but not from exhaustion, more like awe. The forge is different at night, slower, quieter, more personal, but it also brings visions, or maybe just hallucinations, because after 2 hours of sleep, you swear you see the anvil talking to you. It doesn't move its mouth, obviously, that would be ridiculous, but when you pass it on your way to the tool rack, you hear something like a hum, or a murmur, low, metallic, almost like it's saying, "Strike better?" You blink, stare, shake your head. Osric walks in and says nothing, but his face says, "Yep." You're at that stage now. You're told to rest. Instead, you organize nails by size and name them for fun. Big ones, Boris. Medium ones, Aldrich. Bent ones, Cynthia. Sleep deprivation, almost certainly. But what's wild is that despite your brain melting, your hands are better than ever. You hammer with confidence. You twist with purpose. You even file a blade into shape without cutting yourself once. A new record. Even Osric notices. You've got the rhythm now, he says. Forge doesn't scare you anymore. And it's true, you're not dodging sparks, not wincing at every hiss, not second-guessing your grip. You've become something else. Not a master, not even a journeyman, but a blacksmith who believes their own hands. Later, as you sit outside and eat a small apple someone left behind, probably cursed, you feel a breeze. Cool. Software full of night. You look at your hands, covered in soot, calloused, cracked at the knuckles, but steady. You remember your first day when the tongs slipped and you almost set your foot on fire. Now, you could forge blindfolded. Not that you'd recommend it. Night work doesn't faze you anymore, and even when the shadows creep in, and the anvil whispers weird things, and the bellows groan like old men at dawn, you light the fire anyway, because the forge doesn't sleep. And neither, it seems, do you. You're halfway through scrubbing rust off a wagon brake when a boy runs in, panting hard and looking half-possessed. He says one word. Witch! Osric doesn't even look up. It's Tuesday. Of course someone's a witch. But the boy isn't joking. Apparently strange noises have been coming from the old woodshed behind the chapel. People are claiming they saw sparks in the night. Not fire sparks. And naturally, they've come to a perfectly reasonable conclusion. It's the blacksmith's fault. Because if something mysterious happens, and it involves fire, heat, or strange clanging noises, you must be the cause. And that's how you get roped into the weirdest part of your week, dealing with superstition. See, blacksmiths in this village are more than just workers. To some, you're half magician, half priest, and half goat wrestler, depending on the day. Yes, that's too many halves. Math isn't their strong suit. You're already used to people bringing you charms to bless with fire or asking you to forge demon-proof hinges for their doors. But now, apparently, someone thinks the sparks you make at the forge are chasing away ghosts, which would be flattering if they didn't also want you to show up and banish the woodshed demon. You tell Osric. He just grunts. Take the tongs. Wear something scary. Sparks and superstition. Just another day in the medieval forge. Mainstream historical fact. Blacksmiths in medieval Europe were deeply entwined with local superstition. Their ability to control fire and transform metal gave them a mystical aura. In some places, they were even called upon to perform minor rituals or symbolic cleansings for protection. Quirky tidbit. In several folk traditions, newly forged horseshoes were nailed above doors not just for luck, but because they were believed to ward off evil spirits, witches, and bad harvests. Some blacksmiths even kept a witch nail hidden behind the forge. A bent, rusty spike said to capture curses. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths encouraged these beliefs for status, or just went along with it because it meant free food and fewer torch-wielding mobs. You arrive at the woodshed with your tools, a lantern, and your most ominous-looking apron. It's just your regular apron, but it's covered in enough soot and burns to qualify as menacing. The villagers stand back. One woman clutches garlic. A man crosses himself repeatedly. A goat watches from behind a fence, eyes full of judgment. You open the shed. No demon. Just a broken weather vane that's been scraping against a loose beam. The wind must have hit it just right to throw sparks from a rusted iron-on-wood friction. You fix it in 10 minutes, but do you tell them the truth? Of course not. You raise your hammer, bang it once against the ground, and shout, "Begone, woodshade demon!" There's a collective gasp. The old man next to you drops to his knees. You calmly relight your lantern and leave without another word. Back at the forge, Osric raises an eyebrow. Exorcism successful? You hold up a bent nail. Banished it into this. He chuckles. Don't let it out. That night, someone leaves a small pouch of dried herbs and a little cake by your forge door. A thank you, or a bribe. You eat the cake anyway. Then come the other requests. A woman asks you to forge a protective amulet for her cow. A shepherd wants you to make a blessing ring to wear around his neck, something to keep wolves away. And a group of children beg you to forge a tiny iron crow to keep the ghosts from stealing their dreams. You say yes to all of it. Because why not? You forge the amulet with a cow hoof design. You stamp stars into the blessing ring. And the crow, it's crude. Crooked. The wings are uneven. But the kids love it. They scream with joy and tie it to a stick like a flag of victory. You find it later hanging outside the schoolhouse. Your forge becomes magical. People bring you small offerings now. Bread, cheese, carved wood for luck work. You still make hinges and tools, yes. But now you also make hope. Osric shakes his head. You're a blacksmith, not a priest. Then why do they keep calling me the Emberman? He doesn't have an answer. One night, after a long day of fixing shears and blessing random iron sticks, you sit by the fire and feel it again. That hum from the anvil. The whisper. Or maybe just your imagination. But it says something different this time. Forge well. You smile. You will. Tomorrow, there will be more weird tasks. More frightened villagers. More mysterious clanks in the night. But you'll be ready. Because now, you're not just the one who fixes tools. You're the one they whisper about. The one who made fire sing, the one who forged a crow that protects dreams. And hey, if you're going to be misunderstood, might as well lean into it. You wake up and something feels off. The morning air is still. Too still. The forge is quiet, the usual metallic scent dulled. No hammering from Osric, no whining hinges outside. Even the chickens aren't screaming, which is concerning in itself. You open the door and step outside. Then you see it. A cart, covered in a sheet. Sitting at the edge of the village square. Next to it, a boy you've never seen before holding a stick like it's a sword. His face is pale. His boots are wrapped in rags. He doesn't move when you approach. You ask him what's wrong. He points to the cart. Mother's in there. Father, too. It hits you like a blow from your own hammer. The plague is here. The cart is full of bodies. The church bell doesn't ring. No one wants to touch the rope. You back away slowly, heart pounding, mouth dry. Then you do the only thing that makes sense in your rattled brain. You run to the forge. Osric's already there, sitting on his bench, silent. They're saying it came from the next town, he says. A peddler or a soldier. It doesn't matter who, it's here now. And suddenly, everything changes. People stop coming to the forge. The work dries up overnight. No one wants to touch metal or breathe the same air, or risk anything at all. Doors stay shut. Curtains close. The square is empty. And you're not sure what to do. Osric tells you to keep the fire lit. Even death fears iron, he mutters. So you do. You hammer. You shape. You stoke the fire not for work, but for the sound. For the comfort. For the illusion that something in this world is still under your control. But it doesn't last. 2 days in, a man collapses outside your forge. You recognize him, the baker's brother. His face is blotchy. His breath is short. He's dead before you can fetch Osric. And just like that, you're not a blacksmith anymore. You're a gravedigger. Mainstream historical fact. During plague outbreaks, especially the Black Death, many blacksmiths and other tradesmen were forced into roles outside their profession. When clergy, doctors, or grave workers died, blacksmiths were often the strongest, able-bodied survivors left to dig graves, build coffins, or even dispose of bodies. Quirky tidbit. In some areas, people believed that heating iron in the forge and hanging it above doorways could keep the plague away. Others wore small, forged iron charms around their necks, shaped like crosses, animals, or symbols of health. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths had higher survival rates due to working with fire daily and thus cleaner environments, or whether that's just romantic hindsight applied centuries later. The village slowly empties. Some flee. Some lock themselves inside. Some simply vanish. You and Osric take turns digging graves. At first, you try to be respectful, lining the holes with stones, carving names into scraps of wood. By the 5th grave, you're just trying to keep the shovel straight. By the 10th, you're numb. You bury a boy with a toy iron crow still in his hand. That one breaks you. You sit by the forge that night, fire low, hands shaking, smoke curling around you like a blanket you didn't ask for. Osric lights a small lantern and hands you something. A blade. Small. Crude. Half finished. I started this when you arrived, he says. Didn't think you'd last a week. You stare at it. Then you take it. You finish the blade in silence. It's not for war. Not for show. Just something real. Something complete. The next morning you make a few iron tokens. Simple crosses, hoops, a tiny hammer on a string. You leave them on doorsteps quietly while the village sleeps, or pretends to. Not because they work, but because someone has to do something. Osric stops speaking for a few days, just works. Then one morning he leaves you a note scrawled on the back of an old invoice. If I go, keep the forge breathing. You never mention it. You just keep working. Not for payment, not for praise, but because the anvil still rings, because the fire still glows, because in a world falling apart, you still remember how to make something whole. And that might be enough. You don't know how many days it's been. The sun rises, you work. The sun sets, you dig. Then you hammer. Then you sleep. Kind of. Osric hasn't spoken in 2 days. He just sharpens tools. He hasn't eaten much either. You're worried. The forge, though. The forge still breathes. That rhythmic poomph of the bellows, the dull clang of metal against anvil. It's the only thing that reminds you you're still here. Still useful. Still alive. You start waking earlier just to sit beside the coals before the world stirs. Sometimes you whisper to the anvil. Not prayers, just updates. Fix the latch on the chapel gate, you say softly. Use the last of the good nails. Osric's still pretending to be invincible. And the anvil, of course, says nothing, but it listens. Then one morning you find Osric sitting on the ground outside the forge, hunched, cradling something in his hands. It's the first horseshoe you ever made. Crooked, ugly, burned on one edge. You remember it clearly. He looks up at you, eyes tired, voice low. You ever think about leaving? He asks. You don't answer right away. You look out over the village. A few people left, the empty square, the grave markers leaning at strange angles. Then you look back at the forge. I did, you say honestly. But now, you pause. Now I think I'd miss the smoke. He grins. The first real grin in weeks. You're more Smith than boy now. It's not a compliment. Not quite, but not an insult either. Later that day, you catch Osric teaching the Reeves' son how to twist a nail head into a spiral. Just for fun. Just for something to do. You quietly add more coal to the forge, keeping the heat steady. The truth is, life hasn't gone back to normal, but there's a new rhythm now. Villagers begin to emerge again, slowly, carefully, one by one. A farmer brings a rusted hoe. A widow needs her gate latch mended. A baker wants the oven iron scraped clean. None of them say it, but you can feel it. They're not here for the work. Not really. They're here because the forge is still glowing. And that glow means something. You make more charms, small ones. You don't call them charms, of course. You say leftover scrap. But people wear them. A nail on a string, a bent ring of iron, a flattened spoon polished to a shine. You see them everywhere now, hanging from belts, dangling from windows, tied to lantern posts. You're not just the fixer anymore. You're something quieter, something steadier. One day, a traveling merchant wanders into town. He asks where the blacksmith is. A small girl points to you. The firekeeper, she says. You don't correct her because she's not wrong. The forge is smaller now, quieter. But it hasn't gone out. And neither have you. And now? As the fire dies low and the coals settle into a gentle hush, you sit back on the worn bench beside the anvil. Your hands rest quietly in your lap, skin blackened but steady. The tools are hung. The bellows are tied. The day is done. Outside, the village is quiet. A soft breeze rustles the branches overhead. Somewhere, a goat sneezes. You smile. Life returns in strange ways. You stare into the fading embers. They glow softly, not with urgency, not with power. Just a warm pulse, slow, patient, alive. Like a heartbeat tucked beneath ash. You think of all that passed, the blisters, the nails, the superstitions, the horses, the grave digging, the silence. And yet, here you are, still breathing, still forging, still mending. You take a long, deep breath, the kind that fills your chest, stretches your shoulders, and pulls the tension right out through your toes. Then another, slower, softer. And as your eyes grow heavy, you feel it. That quiet pride. Not loud, not showy. Just the steady hum of someone who endured. Someone who hammered through the storm and kept the coals lit even when the world tried to blow them out. You lie back now, letting the warmth from the forge seep into your bones. The anvil, the tools, the worn leather apron, they're not just things anymore. They're part of you. And as your breath slows and the stars blink on overhead, the village sleeps. The forge sleeps. And so finally do you. Good night, firekeeper.